welcome back to the Festival of the Unexplained. Hope you're having a fantastic day. As you well know, we've had some amazing guests all day today, and we've got even more lined up through the night and also tomorrow for you. So needless to say, I'm excited about this. The reason why I'm excited about it is because whilst I was in hospital, I wanted some books to read. But I wanted something a little bit different, something that I was interested in, but also something that somebody else had told me about. Now, a really good friend of mine, Penny, mentioned a couple of books, and one book in particular that she mentioned was the Hanging Pit. Now, this is written by a fantastic author. His name is Richard Estep, and he is joining me right now. So, hi, Richard.
Hi, Joe. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Good morning for me, good afternoon for you, I believe.
Yeah, it is afternoon. And obviously we know that you're super busy at the moment because you're working on the front line, aren't you? And with you right now, it's not a great time, is it?
It's been kind of the week from hell here in Boulder County with half of it burning down and with coronavirus infections rising as they are most places. So, yeah, It's been a year. This week has been a heck of a year, you know.
Bless you. Well, I do appreciate you taking the time out to speak to me anyway. But as I was just mentioning, you're an EMT, aren't you, over in the States? So you are British born and bred? Yeah,
I'm a paramedic here in the States, but I come from Leicester, and as I'm speaking to you, I can already hear my Leicester coming out. So apologies to American listeners. It usually takes me 5 minutes off the plane in Heathrow. Remember when we could fly into Heathrow?
Yeah. Seems a long time ago.
It takes me 5 minutes for my accent to become pure Leicester. Usually I have to talk into a taxi driver. And so now here it is. It's coming back up again. You're right.
That's good though, isn't it? So, but I was just saying that whilst I was in hospital, Penny, who is a very good friend of mine, mentioned a couple of your books to me. Now, I know that you founded a paranormal team, didn't you, quite a long time ago when you got to America with your wife back in 1999. That seems like such a long time ago, doesn't it?
It was 20 years ago. Yeah, well, 21 years ago now. And I actually had hooked up with another American team first and then wanted to go my own way. Great bunch of people. And I just have always wanted to investigate with a smaller group and kind of do it my own way. So I began doing this back in Leicester in the mid-90s. And back then, this was pre-Most Haunted, pre-Ghost Hunters. So there was no TV ghost hunting back then. And those were the days before you couldn't throw a rock in any town without hitting a team. You know, now it's crazy. There are groups everywhere. But back then, I think we covered Leicester, Nottingham, the Midlands, places like that. And seemed like very few people were doing it. ASAP was around, you know, they took bigger cases. But and things have drastically changed now. And of course, everybody seems to want to be a part of this.
Yeah, and it's like you say, it's madness now, isn't it? You know, you go into a town now and you've probably got, 15 to 20 different paranormal teams, and we've got quite a lot of events companies as well now who have started, to do the public investigations. So when you founded your paranormal team in America, did you do the public investigations or did you just do private cases?
We really just did private stuff. Help cases was the main reason I've always done this. I do fewer of them these days, but we were mainly interested in helping people that were afraid in their own homes. And that kind of gradually morphed. The problem is now genuine help cases are harder to find because it seems that so many people are influenced by what they've seen on TV. I'm sure you find this yourself. And are disappointed, perhaps to be told there may be a non-paranormal explanation for what they're experiencing.
Yeah. And you do find that quite often, don't you, with people, because they do see the dramatizations through, the likes of the TV shows for entertainment purposes, so to speak. And, they do sometimes come back and, sometimes they don't like what we actually say to them, though, do they? When you've been to a case and you say, I can't actually find any reasons as to why you're experiencing what you're experiencing.
How dare you? How dare you say that? But it's exactly that kind of mindset. And I think many help cases, I found at least, they want validation. They don't want necessarily the truth. And as a medical professional, I mean, I always speak to them in confidence about their medications, because so many medications have the side effects of hallucinations, and people forget that we can hallucinate with all 5 senses. All of our senses can be fooled. So if I say the word hallucination, there's this perception that, I mean, people are seeing things, but you can hallucinate auditorily, you can hallucinate olfactorily, smelling. Any of your senses can be fooled, and medications will do that to you, especially if they're new. So I like to build up that kind of clinical picture. I like to look at the house, the location itself. I spent 15 years as a firefighter here in the States, and it taught me a lot about building construction. And if you understand the way buildings are put together and the way the air moves through them, the way that subsidence works and things of that nature, that solved more than a couple of cases too.
Yeah. And it's good that you understand that as well. But also, like you were just mentioning, then you like to build up a picture. I think any normal investigator would ask those questions regarding, medication, if they're on medication, or if they've been diagnosed with any sort of mental illnesses or anything like that, because you do have to build up a picture of the person and what their background is, don't you?
You absolutely do. I mean, and mental illness has such a stigma. I'm a diagnosed depressive myself. I take medication for it. It's not something that you can help, but it is something that's, and what I mean by that is nobody chooses to be that way, but it can be treated. And it's important to accept that that's a part of the overall picture. If you don't factor that in, you're not doing the client or the case a good service.
Yeah. Do you think, obviously, because I know you've just mentioned then that you take medication, I suffer with anxiety, and I'm not afraid to say anything about that. I do, and I don't know why I suffer with it, but it's only on certain things that I suffer with it from. But do you think because that we are quite open to the spiritual world and we do these investigations, do you think we're more susceptible to it?
I mean, that may be the case. I personally don't have the paranormal encounters that a lot of people seem to. I was just talking about this last night with Michelle Belanger, in fact, and the fact that some people just do seem to be more prone to these interactions. And then if they engage in the activities we engage in, they do go to haunted places, they do seek this out actively. It seems to take a greater interest in them in return. There's that old saying, right, about gaze into the abyss and the abyss gazes into you. Mm-hmm. I think the more interested you become in the paranormal in an active way, it will take an interest in you right back sometimes.
Yeah. And it's good because your work has kind of seen you help to put TV shows together. So like Haunted Hospitals you've been on at the moment, haven't you? And you've been on quite a few of the shows as well. So how did you manage to mix those together and create that show?
Well, really, I didn't create Haunted Hospitals, but I was in at the ground floor. And the deal with that was that I'd done Haunted Case Files, which in the UK as Paranormal Investigators is what it's called, where they dramatize a bunch of my cases. But I'd written a book called The World's Most Haunted Hospitals, which I'm not a fan of the title, honestly. I don't think anybody should say that they have identified the world's most haunted anything. But publishers do like, their own titles and series. And the story was that ever since I became first an EMT and then a paramedic, I had a reputation as being that ghost guy. So if a nurse or a physician or a patient had a strange experience and they told somebody about it, they would say, well, when Richard, that ghost guy, drops off a patient, you should talk to him. You should share this. He loves this stuff. And it happened enough that I decided that, we should start bringing these to a wider audience. I wanted to start writing these down. And so that kind of morphed into me writing about World's Most Haunted Hospitals and then going to a number of other haunted hospitals like Asylum 49 in Utah, places like that. And so my suspicion is, and I'm sure they won't mind me saying it, when the TV company started putting together the show Haunted Hospitals, I think they literally just Googled those two words. My book came up and I got a phone call, And so that's kind of how it took off. And they asked me to consult with them and be a talking head on the show. And I just wrapped on season 3 last month, in fact. So that should be coming our way next year.
Fantastic. But what experiences have you had in the hospitals, or is it just hearsay from other people? Is it their cases?
Bugger all when I'm working, Jolene. And I get asked a lot. Like I also do Paranormal 911, and one question I get asked a lot on interviews is, well, when you're working as a paramedic or when you were working as a firefighter, what experiences did you have? I'm usually so focused on my patient or on the emergency that I've been called to. You could have a parade of headless horsemen go by and I wouldn't notice. Because, it's my job to be focused on keeping that person alive and figuring out what's wrong with them. But there seem to be a lot of medical providers and police officers that do have strange experiences. So I've enjoyed helping document those. And I still do get phone calls and emails from people that wear the badge and just, want to discuss it, and that they want to talk with someone that they know there's not going to be a stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
All the tragedy and things that the front lines see, not just policemen, firemen, ambulance crews. I think anybody who works in the army and the Navy and places like that, they all have their own personal experiences, don't they?
I think some of them do, by all means, yeah. And a lot depends on mindset and the circumstances that they're in. And many just don't like to talk about it. There was a time that it was career suicide, to talk about seeing ghosts. I mean, a lot of doctors still have that attitude today. I was speaking with a physician, a friend of mine, just this weekend, who was telling me he'd had experiences, but would never allow them to be shared and could not, talk about them publicly because you would be ridiculed. I think we're seeing that lessen a little bit right now. And I've noticed that nurses especially, I love nurses. They're the NCOs of the medical world. Mm-hmm. Sergeants run the army, nurses run hospitals. Any doctor will tell you that.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that just don't care. They'll tell you their stories and they'll say, this happened, deal with it. I'm not going to hide it. So I love getting nurse stories.
That's good. What's your most memorable story that you've had from somebody?
The most memorable one happened, it was a personal interaction I had, and I made it the central story of my book, Haunted Healthcare. I teach at a paramedic academy, and I got a call from them that another instructor who I'd never met had a son named Kyle that he was dying of terminal cancer. And he was a very young man. He'd had it since he was 10 years of age. And he'd been fighting this for 13 years and was now into the final stages. They knew he was not going to survive. And he was seeing the ghosts of children he'd undergone chemotherapy with over the years who had since passed. He was seeing them visit him in his bedroom. And his dad he'd heard what I did, and he hoped I would just come hang out and tell him, hey, it's okay. You've nothing to be afraid of. And when I heard that story, there's no way you say no, right? You don't. So I went to visit him, and I fully expected to spend a couple of hours hanging out with this young man and feel like I'd done the right thing and I would go back to my life. And it hit me like a punch in the guts. And we became fast friends, he and I. And he told me his story and then invited me to share it with a wider audience. And the ghosts were almost tangential in this, Jolene, because, he was very naturally skeptical. He said, I thought maybe it might be a side effect of my drugs, but I've stopped my painkillers now and I'm no longer taking any chemotherapy. So, because he was into palliative care, he said, well, I know it's not the side effects of any medications. And he said that without me asking him, which I thought was pretty cool. He said, and I wondered if I might be dreaming it, but I have one of those Apple Fitbit watches, and it told me that I was awake at the time, not sleeping, the last time this happened. And I've tried to get some photographs, but nothing is showing up. So the kid was debunking his own story, which I thought was brilliant, And he and I were firm friends for a year until he finally passed. But what he really taught me, and what I wanted to share with people when I wrote that book, was that it was a very positive experience to him. He described that these two figures, 7 feet tall, came into his room, and the cancer had gotten into his face and had actually eaten away part of his jawbone. Horrible, horrible, painful experience. And he'd been suffering with it for days. And he said one of them placed a hand on his face, and the pain stopped instantly and never came back.
That's amazing.
Incredible. Yeah, absolutely. And he was told by one of these entities that the third time will be the final time. And this was the third time he'd had cancer. He'd defeated it twice. He'd beaten it twice. But this time it got into his lungs and there was no saving him. And he knew this. So he found it a very uplifting experience and not frightening.
Yeah. So it's so sad, isn't it, when, you know, people pass away of illnesses like that, and they have that knowledge, don't they, that they're passing away, and they know, you know, the end is near. And, you know, I've just been recently spoken to a friend of mine who lost somebody very close to him. And he basically, when he spoke to me about it, he just said this person was like a shadow of themselves. And, you know, he'd taken a picture and he'd sent it to me. And I said, there are people with him right now. And I said, so you know, don't be of the essence that nobody's going to be there to collect him. And this gentleman was very, very skeptical. And he said to me, it's funny you should say that, because the atmosphere was so charged. He said, I could feel it. He said it was like electricity. He said there was no way that, you know, somebody walk into that room and not know that there was somebody else there in the room.
Yeah. I think talking to palliative care providers, the nurses, I mean, you want to talk about people that do truly angelic work, you know, those that assist the dying. It's a sacred calling, right? And it's no wonder there's such a high burnout rate in that part of the medical field. But these people all have stories, or so many of them have stories, and they are almost all hopeful ones.
Yeah.
My mom died in Leicester, in Loros. Some great people in Loros, the hospice in Leicester. And I spoke to a nurse that attended her, and she said that my mom was having very lucid conversations with dead family members right before she passed. And that's a fairly common phenomenon.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, even you can have somebody that's had a state of complete altered mentation for years. Somebody that has not been able to, you know, they don't know where they are, what's going on, when it is. They may be living 50 years in the past. And then it's almost as if for a brief period, this veil is lifted and they're their old selves again. And they're able to communicate with people that have passed on, and then they pass themselves.
Yeah.
I've heard that over and over.
Yeah, and it's funny that, because before, I think it was 2017, before I had my first spinal operation, I was in hospital for 2 weeks in the August, and they put me on a stroke ward. And I remember seeing a lady in the opposite bed to myself, and I know I was on, you know, heavy drugs. I knew that I was on, you know, morphine and quite a lot of drugs. But what I saw, I will never, ever forget. And this lady, it looked like her soul was leaving her body. And every time I looked at her, it was like she was sat up in bed and she was just like looking around everywhere. And then that was it. And then the next day she sadly passed away. But I told the nurses about, you know, what I'd seen, and they said they'd seen it themselves, which to me, that's amazing that I'd actually witnessed that. But obviously being a medium, you'd probably expect me to witness it. But then there was another incident that I had in the hospital as well, when I was in the same hospital, but in a different room. And this was in the January of 2017. And I actually went into the room, and I was in a ward on my own, in like a room on my own, which in the NHS here, you don't usually get that. You're in a room with, you know, 4 other people. And I just remember waking up and I said, can you tell Carol to leave me alone? She won't leave me alone. And the young ward clerk came in and she said, what did you say? And I said, Carol with the dark curly hair and the pink nightie on. I said, she keeps on telling me to get out of her bed. And I said, I just need to tell her to go away. And she says, oh my goodness, I can't believe you've just said that. And apparently there was a gentleman in that exact same bed the week previous who basically had what can only be described as a bit of a breakdown. And all he kept shouting was, she keeps telling me to get out of her bed and it's not her bed. So, you know, people have experiences, don't they, within those hospitals, even though they're on heavy medication. And I find it fascinating. I do. But like you say, palliative care, that is probably a calling that I wouldn't be able to do, because I'm such an emotional person. And, you know, caring for these people, I'd probably get too emotionally attached, I think.
Yeah, it takes a very special breed of individual to do that kind of work, especially for any length of time. And my hat goes off to everyone that does it. And you know, also, to those people that are not trained, that are caring for a relative that has a long-term illness. We see more and more of that these days too. And there is this, you never quite know, do you? When you're walking the streets or driving the streets, you never quite know what's going on behind the closed doors. But there are these kind of battles of quiet desperation going on across the country as people care for, loved ones with dementia, Alzheimer's, and other conditions under tremendous stress. And I can only imagine how worse that's gotten this year. Well, it has gotten significantly worse this year, what with the strangeness that we're all dealing with. So
yeah. And it's you hear it quite regularly as well on the television, on the radio. And, I'm quite an avid listener of radio too. And I remember listening to people actually saying that they're taking their elderly parents out of care homes and out of palliative care to look after them because of the situation and them not being able to visit, and they can't care for them as they would do. And I just, this year has just been very surreal and very strange in itself.
I've never known a year like it in my 18 years in medicine. I've never known anything like it, and hopefully never will again. Once this is
touch wood, we hope to never have anything like that. But apart from you being on haunted hospitals and doing your emergency services, you're actually an acclaimed author. And I have to thank you for keeping me entertained, because I bought one book, which is this book here, The Axe Murder House. I bought that book just to read whilst I was in hospital. And literally, I read the first few pages and I couldn't put it down. And since then, obviously, I've been speaking to Johnny Hauser and just going through all of the investigations that you did there. And do you know what? I must admit, I think I've got 3 other books of yours as well now. I've got The Gacy's Ghost, which Wes and I were speaking about last night as well. And I've also got The Hanging Pit of Bodmin Jail, and also The Devil's Coming to Get Me. So which, out of those 4 books, which would you say is your favorite place to investigate?
Oh, there's no way. That's like asking someone what their favorite kid is. I love Valiska and Johnny Hauser. Johnny's the most American man I've ever met in my entire life. That dude. I've got to take a pass because I love them all for different reasons. One of the things that I like about writing books, and thank you for the kind words, by the way, is that I look at them on the shelf, and when I see the cover or I see the spine of a specific book, it takes me right back to the adventures that I had and that time of my life. I wrote the book about Malvern 2 years ago, for example, and spent a lot of hours and days, thank you very much, walking the hallways of that old manor, just trying to, root out the stories of the people that had stayed there, that had been residents, and some of the spirits that still remain. So I love all of them in different ways. There are some locations, though, I'm more fond of than others, like Valiska. It's a horrible murder and such a nasty, nasty thing. I'd be happy to never go back to Valiska.
Yeah.
It's not a house that I'm fond of.
Yeah.
But then Malvern feels like home to me. It's the weirdest thing. There's a very homey atmosphere at Malvern. And one of my favorite TV shows, I'm sure you watch, at least many of your viewers will, is Ghosts on the BBC. I love that show. And the story about the old manor house full of ghosts actually reminds me of Malvern a little bit.
It's great. Yeah, it's great because we've got also on the festival, we've got Josh doing a live tour of Malvern as well. So that's going to be fantastic.
When is that?
Inside. That is going to be this evening at 9 p.m. Mm-hmm. So Sunday the 25th at 9 p.m. So he's going to do a live tour. So yeah, he's going to be doing that. But that's 9 p.m. UK time. So
okay.
I think 3 p.m. your time or, Iowa time. So yeah, so that's great. But what experiences of the paranormal did you experience whilst you was at the Axe Murder House? Now, I know because I've read the book, but for those who haven't, just sort of like sneak previews.
The strangest thing about the Axe Murder House, so we walked in and if you don't know Johnny Hauser, he's Mr. Valiska, I always say. He lives next door. He's been the caretaker of that house for many, many years. And he has this affinity with the house. And I'd always wanted to meet him anyway, he's one of those people that he's every bit as nice in person as he appears on the telly.
Yeah, he is.
So we've been in the house maybe 30 minutes, and Johnny came over to visit. I texted him, and he sent me the most ominous text I've ever got. I think I put this in the book, and he said, the house has been really weird today. I think it knows you're coming. Great, thanks, man. Then he texted me again and said, some little kid just ran off the tour screaming, FYI. and then he came over to visit us, and he'd been in the house maybe 30 seconds, and we heard this colossal boom. And I'm like, that's the sound of something very heavy and expensive falling over. And so we searched the house and could not find a single thing out of place. I have it on audio. I don't know what it was. I actually thought maybe a car hit the building or something.
Was it that loud?
It was that loud. And there's nothing that we brought with us that could have made that kind of noise. Now, speaking about Villisca and Malvern, there's a link between the two, or we thought there might have been. Some people have the theory that the Villisca axe murderer, who was never identified, may have stayed at Malvern Manor, which is about an hour's drive away, because it used to be a hotel. So I was at Malvern Manor when I was researching that book. Johnny Hauser was at the Villisca axe murder house, and I phoned him while he was there and asked him, do you think there's any connection between the two? And he said, well, and just as he started speaking, he said, hang on a minute. Somebody's banging on the ceiling, and I'm the only one in the house. So he's like a catalyst. He's one of those individuals that I think a location itself knows so well and is familiar with. Josh is like that at Malvern, So when you get your tour with Josh at Malvern, he's kind of that guy too. The spirits seem to be all aware of them, and they will be more reactive when they're around. But we had a lot of footsteps when we were there. I recorded the EVP of a child giggling, which is truly sinister. Because there were only 3 middle-aged men in the house at that time.
And it's great when you can kind of you can debunk that, can't you? When there's only men in the house and the child's giggling.
There's absolutely no way to explain it when it's the sound of a child, or when it's the sound of a female and there are 3 males, that kind of thing, or vice versa. So the house was not spectacular for me. The house was consistently impressive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The truth is, in reality, and I hope my books convey this, I always scratch my head when I see TV shows and things are flying off the shelves and, dark hooded figures and all this stuff. And it seems very Hollywood. And yet true paranormal research, as I know that you, and I'm sure your viewers understand, is 90% boredom, waiting for that other 10% to happen. And the nice thing about writing books is that I can cut out that 90%, or at least I can make a day of nothing happening pass in a paragraph, So we had days at Villisca where nothing at all happened. And then we had other days where something was hammering on the wall. We could not figure out what it was, but it was very plainly there. We had days when electrical devices were turning themselves off and on and things of that nature. So I try and convey that, with books like the Villisca Axe Murder House. And I'm also interested in why the place, not why it's haunted, but Johnny House's theory is that the house is haunting itself.
Yeah.
So many paranormal investigators and tourists have come through that we've almost, we fed this thing and given it a life of its own. And I can buy into that theory.
Yeah, because I've discussed that with Johnny, actually, because I did an interview with him a couple of nights ago. And, he did actually say that as well. He said that the amount of people who've come in here and given off energy and it's feeding the house, I think the house is haunting itself. And it's quite an unusual theory to have, isn't it? Obviously we do give off the energy for the houses and the fabrics of the buildings to kind of cling on to. But for him to say that, as well as, and obviously you've now said that, it's just, for 2 people to kind of say it, it's just phenomenal, I think.
Well, we go back to the thought form theory, and when you have Josh's tour of Malvern, the thought form of Inez is probably the one to ask him a little bit about, because this is a little girl supposedly found hanging in what's called Inez's room on the 2nd floor, and visitors and investigators interact with this little girl to this day. They get EVPs. She's sometimes been seen. Spirit boards will give the name Inez over and over. And yet Inez never died at Malvern Manor. She died at home several streets away. So I'm fascinated with this whole possibility that we may, deliberately or not, be creating our own hauntings in these locations.
Yeah, or the spirits have visited these locations and love them so much that they like to travel there. And is that a theory that we would possibly say?
I think that it's certainly something that we should consider. But you look at the Philip experiment, and it pretty much proved that if you put enough energy and intent into creating a haunting, it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why both theories can't be equally true, and then, case dependent.
Yeah.
I do think that when I started, so I began reading books before there was any paranormal TV. I read everything by Peter Underwood and Harry Price and, the greats, because you could only really go to the library and get those great the Osborne Book of Ghosts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, the more of those kind of stories that I read, I noticed that until TV came along, there were very few dark hauntings. I don't know if you noticed this, but most of the stuff that was documented seemed to be spirits that were very fond of the places they lived in. Yeah, you got your murders and, your ghosts of war and things of that nature. But a lot of, especially British houses, the old stately homes and stuff, were haunted by people that loved them a great deal in life and either didn't seem to want to let go yet, or some part of them had remained.
Yeah. Usually as well, like the only, real documented poltergeist cases was the Enfield poltergeist and also the East Drive poltergeist. Yeah. There wasn't really much by way of demonic entities, so to speak. They just basically, that I think that's probably come about more since the entertainment on TV. And, they just, glamorize this whole negative entity business, don't they?
100%. I mean, you can actually, I hope someday, and it won't be me, but I hope someday somebody writes a history of paranormal entertainment and starts looking at the way this whole thing came about, because it really begins about 1999 with Most Haunted and Ghost Hunters. I think Most Haunted was first and Ghost Hunters came a year after. But even then, the word demonic started getting used by a very specific program.
Yeah.
And I think it caused rating spikes because that brings excitement and that brings fear. And so it started cropping up again and again. And until finally, every week it's, could this be a dark negative? Well, I mean, frankly, there aren't that many dark hauntings going on. But if you want to spin it that way for ratings purposes, if that's your intent, then you can do that. But it's had this knock-on effect now of a lot of people are terrified. They see some fairly innocuous phenomena occurring in their home. I did a case once, a help case here in the States, and it drove a poor young Mexican couple out of their home, the first home they'd ever bought, because they were convinced it was demonically infested. And it turned out the actual problem was they were on the flight path to Denver International Airport. We proved that what they thought were these terrifying footsteps walking through their creaking floorboards at night tracked with heavy air traffic coming in. We used microphones to prove it. And they were still so convinced, so terrified that they had a demonic entity that they fled the house, their first ever home. It's tragic.
It is sad, really, isn't it, when people, who don't necessarily watch these shows and they think that they have a classic sign of a haunting and it is demonic, and they do say that it's frightening to know that they haven't got anywhere really to go, have they? Because they just watch the TV and think, oh yeah, this is exactly what it is, until the likes of us go into a house and debunk it basically for them.
Yeah, I mean, my friend Dave Schrader put it best, I think. So Dave gets a lot of calls. He does Holzer Files these days, and of course is well known for Darkness Radio. And he told me, he said he's gotten calls from people that said, well, I think I have a demon. And he said, no, you don't. He said, you never think you have a demon. If you do, it will ransack your life. It's like a train ran through your house. You will not mistake this. There's no if, ands, buts, or maybes. And I'm not saying that I don't believe such entities could exist. Personally, I'm kind of on the fence. And I think the D word, it's much more popular here in the US than it is in the UK, which is more secular,
Yeah.
But whatever you want to call it an inhuman entity, call it whatever you want. But I don't, I'm not against the possibility those entities exist, but I don't think they are nearly as common as TV would have you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a very real danger in misinterpreting this, because you see people living in terror in their own homes, and it's all funny when it's happening on TV. When it's happening, in your bedroom or your living room, it's frightening.
Yeah.
And we've done those help cases over and over again, and what they really need is education.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, there's nothing to fear, as I'm sure you'll agree. And it's about helping people live with whatever phenomena they're experiencing, because there's no off switch. You can do a blessing, you can attempt to mitigate it, and sometimes that works, and sometimes that actually inflames the situation. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's possible to tell which it's going to be in advance. But this fascination with the so-called demonic, it disturbs me. It really does.
Yeah, and me as well, because being in this field for a number of years, it's kind of getting worse. And I think there is an awful lot of people out there who like to provoke, who we watching these shows at the moment, provoking and being downright disrespectful towards the spirit realm. And I just think TV shows that are glamorizing that as well at the moment, it just it puts a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, really, because these spirits would have once been people who've lived on the earth plane, and for them to be disrespected, I just find it horrific.
I totally agree with you. Respect should be at the heart of all that we do in this field, and unfortunately, again, we come down to the parrot entertainment thing, don't we? You had, I think, my book. Did I see that you have Gacy's Ghost?
I do, yes.
Have you read that yet?
I haven't. This is my next one that I'm going to read.
I'm really sorry, because I'm going to spoil the ending for you.
I'll close my ears.
There we go. But so the short version is that this is about my investigation of a movie theater that is believed to be haunted by John Wayne Gacy. And there are some pretty credible witnesses. I mean, Brad and Barry Kling, the Kling brothers from Ghost Lab, are the ones that sent me this case. The book wouldn't exist without them. So I'm very grateful. And when they say something so, in my experience, then it's usually so. You can take those guys at their word. So I was really excited. And after some extensive investigation, I absolutely will pin my colors to the mast and say that theater is haunted. But I cannot prove it's John Wayne Gacy. Okay. I cannot. If this were TV, then we would have had this, this kind of earth-shattering finale where we made contact with Gacy's spirit. Now, the closest we got was we were doing an Estes session, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Jolene. Yeah. This did send the chills down my spine a little bit, because one of my investigators is sitting there under the hood, and she said, "Oh, he's coming," is what she heard. And I said, "Who's coming?" And she said, "John," immediately. And I said, "Oh, great. Where is John coming from?" And she said, "From hell," which is about as Hollywood as it gets, right? But there was no smoking gun that proves above and beyond that the spirit of John Wayne Gacy was haunting that theater. So I went in to test this proposition. I do determine that, in my opinion, the theater is haunted, but I cannot 100% tell you what. Real life investigations are not clear cut. You don't get all of the answers wrapped up in a neat bow in 45 minutes with adverts, right? You don't. And so I write that, and I'm lucky that I can write the books that I do, because I don't have a production company or a TV network, or even these days, many traditional publishers telling me that it has to go a certain way. I get to put the unvarnished truth in print. And that's why I love writing more, I think, than any other medium.
Yeah. And how many times do you visit these locations when you're writing about them?
I like to move in for, if possible, at least a week, Jolene, because it takes you, I think, at least a day to get used to the idiosyncrasies of a building. You know, you can't just go for a day or a night. You have to figure out what it's like when it starts to contract at night, when the cooler weather comes in, and you start to hear the structural supports kind of contract and creak and things of that nature. And also, I believe, and as a medium, perhaps you can give your opinion, that it takes the building time to get used to you before it grows itself. It's like meeting a stranger, and it takes a while for you to become comfortable enough to really open up.
Yeah, and it also gives whatever is there chance to get used to you as well, because they might I'm just speaking out of obviously the third person, but they might actually feel quite intimidated by somebody new coming in and just literally setting things up. Whereas myself, I like to walk into a property or a building where we're investigating, and I like to say hello first, and tell them what my name is, and I'm just going to set some things up, and we just go through like investigations like that, because I think if you treat them as I know it sounds stupid, but if you treat them as people and be respectful in that sense, then they're more likely to communicate than they would if you just rock up and be disrespectful and just clunk about like it's your own place, and it's it's just, oh, I'm just here to borrow your place for a few hours or a couple of days or however long, and it just gives them time to get used to you and how you work.
There are so few circumstances in life in which respect is not the right approach. Mm-hmm. I mean, one memorable case, a place that I'd be, again, happy never to go back to, was Fox Hollow Farm in Indiana, which was the home of a serial killer, the I-70 Strangler. And I have no qualms at all about provoking a serial killer.
Yeah.
I really don't particularly feel the need to be nice to them. But then we have to take into account the fact that a number of his victims, all of them actually died there in that building. And you don't know who you're addressing. You don't know who you're speaking to. And so the possibility that you're dealing with someone that might have been traumatized, and then killed, you absolutely have to approach that in a certain respectful way.
Yeah.
So the thing about respect is, though, it's not glamorous, right? If you're trying to run a YouTube channel, or if you're trying to put something out to get ratings, provocation sells. And it's absolutely the wrong message we should be sending in this field.
Yeah. But it's like you were just saying then about somebody who's been murdered in a building or traumatized. It's like the layers of an onion, isn't it? When within the house, you peel them back and you find different people, and, you treat them with whichever respect that they deserve. Obviously, like you said, serial killers, definitely not, and people, who have done bad things in life, they're automatically, I'm of the essence that they stay like that in death as well.
I think so too. I don't think we instantly inherit angel wings, a halo, and universal knowledge. I find it more likely that, it's my belief anyway, that we're at a stage of spiritual development on this earth, and when we move on, we graduate maybe to the next level, or maybe we haven't learned our lessons and we have to repeat the semester.
Yeah,
I think it's entirely possible that happens. So if you are angry in life, I think you'll probably be angry in death. And I think that explains a lot of the so-called violent phenomena, people being scratched, things being thrown, things of that nature. I think that's explained by the fact that you have a spirit that's angry and frustrated, because that's part of their psychological makeup.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, though, the people who are getting scratched and, who are being targeted by these entities, you never know what happens with them, behind closed doors. They might not be very nice people, even though they show a facade on the front of it. Then, the spirits may be well aware of that and potentially may be reacting to them.
It's entirely possible. Or it just may be the only way that spirit can communicate.
Yeah.
Is to leave a mark on somebody. So much of this is unknown, which is what draws me back over and over again. It's why we're all doing this, right? It's why we're all so interested. It
is, because, it's like we always say, there's no experts in this field, is there? We're all continuously learning. And, as the circle gets bigger and bigger and you meet more new people, there's always other experiments that people can do. And, I've found, over the past probably 4 years now, I've met some amazing people, and I've worked with some fantastic, paranormal investigators, but also mediums as well. And, I never stop learning, never.
That's the only approach to take. And you're right, there are no experts. I mean, one of the things that we get stick for when we do the shows like Haunted Hospitals and Paranormal 911, people will often tweet and say, why are you calling yourself an expert? And the truth is that I'm not. Neither are you. There are none. But bloke with opinion, I guess, doesn't look good on the Travel Channel. So, they'll call you an expert for want of a better term. But really, we're all researchers working towards a common goal. We're just trying to understand this better.
Yeah. So you were due to come to the UK, weren't you, this year before obviously COVID hit and all the rest of it. Now, I know you've got some fond memories of Bodmin Jail, which is where your book, The Hanging Pit, comes from. Why do you love that place so much?
Part of it is that I really enjoy working with Kirsten, the paranormal manager there. She's a wonderful individual. And I've noticed, perhaps you have too, that haunted places seem to find their guardians. Like they'll find people that love them. And it's almost as if they'll draw them in. I've noticed that a lot of places, there'll be that one person that almost is a protector, a figurehead, a mom or a dad, whatever you want to call it. And I love those kind of people. Those people are my tribe, and I like friendships with those kind of people. But what I love most about the jail, well, number one, it's Cornwall, right? And what's not to love about Cornwall? It's one big episode of Poldark when we go down there. But the Bodmin jail is so dark and gothic, and yet the atmosphere inside there isn't always that way. It's very hard to explain. It has a very unusual, unique feeling to it. And I also, using this analogy again, it really does feel like you're peeling back the layers of an onion. And when I wrote The Hanging Pit, it's one of the few locations that I've had a deeply affecting personal experience in, when I seem to be influenced emotionally by whatever's going on at the jail. That rarely happens to me. And yet I underwent some personality changes while I was there that were quite disturbing. And I want to go back, because I feel like I've only just scratched the surface of that location in the story. And I feel there are so many stories still to be told about that place. And we all know that construction, remodeling, demolition, those things are triggers, catalysts for paranormal activity. Well, they've just knocked down, or essentially completely remodeled a large part of the jail and turned it into a hotel. I can only imagine what effect that has had on spirits, and I want to find out.
That's good. So when are you next over here then?
I was supposed to be over there like next week. I know, right? This has just been the year from hell. Was supposed to be appearing at Sage Paracon, one of my favorite paranormal events, but now it's looking like I'll be there for Shepton Mallet in the spring of 2021. Also doing a couple of other British locations that I'll be researching that I'm not really able to talk about yet. I'm hoping we have a vaccine by then, that it's safe to travel, because one of the big things I'm noticing right now is that people are running paranormal events in person again, and I just can't believe it. It's still not safe. So as a paramedic, I feel like I have to do my part and not put my colleagues at risk by being around large groups of people until it's
Yeah, and I think, these events that are currently running, they were under the rules of 6. It was when 6 people could meet indoors, and they split them into groups of 6. I've not personally ventured to anywhere. I just think, in fact, I think my partner and I have just been locked down together since the start of this, and we have people in our lives who are very vulnerable, and for us to put anybody at risk is just, it's ludicrous, to be honest.
Well, here in the States, we're actually seeing bigger gatherings, far more than 6, and many of them, from what I've seen, at least on social media, without masks. And I totally get the desire, Jolene, like this. I feel that many of us, I'm sure a lot of you that are watching us right now will agree, we've had this thing that we love doing so much taken away from us. And we miss it, and we miss our tribe, we miss our friends, we miss being in the dark with weird people, because we love doing that. But at the same time, I think that we all have to do what's right for the greater good.
Yeah.
So I think that once it's safe to do so again, we should have one hell of a party together, all of us. We should get together, and we're giving the ghosts a bit of a rest, right? I mean, I'm kind of interested in what this is doing to some of our haunted locations that are not getting visitors. It's like a farmer's field that's lying fallow and it's recharging itself. Or, are they starved for attention and energy? And then when people do start going back, are we going to see this explosion of phenomena? I don't know, and I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be it's next year, and when all of this is over, I think we're all going to be in the same boat, aren't we? We're all going to be out there looking for these to see what effects this has had, because we all know when a place gets investigated over and over and over again, that sometimes the spirit dilutes activity, but then again, when you leave it for a couple of weeks and then you go back and it erupts into something phenomenal, I just find what is going to happen next year, it's going to be interesting.
And we live in unprecedented times. I mean, this really hasn't happened before. So it's one big experiment in a way.
Yeah. It's the modern day plague, isn't it? That's probably how the only way to kind of to word it, isn't it? It's the modern day, well, that's what I'm calling it anyway. But other people might disagree with me. But I think, the bubonic plague from yesteryear was quite, it hit us hard, but obviously now this is hitting us hard as well.
Yeah, I like the Spanish flu analogy myself, of 1918.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, I mean, this has been it's been unprecedented. None of us saw this coming. January 1, we had no idea, right? There were these reports coming out of China of this new illness, and most of us, even those of us in the medical field, just said, "Oh, that's interesting," and turned the page. Never imagining that we would see the lockdowns, that we would see the hundreds of thousands of deaths that we've seen, and so on and so forth. But I will also say that, we're all looking for some positivity. So I've seen people behave in the most noble and incredible ways lately. I've seen people inconvenience themselves and go out of their way to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And that really, really warms my heart and impresses me.
Yeah. And I think, that just goes to show that people are still human, because we do live in a society nowadays, don't we, where it's, people don't talk to their neighbors half as much as what they used to do back in, like the 70s. My mum used to go next door for a cup of sugar, but in this day and age, nobody tends to do that. Everybody keeps themselves isolated and, to themselves. But I have found that, if people are desperately in need, people will use their heart and soul to go out and get things for them. And I think, I do think it's brought people together, but it shouldn't have happened in this way, should it?
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, it's the great British spirit. And I love the clapping for the NHS. Here in the US, in my town, people would come out of doors and they would howl at the moon at the same time every night. The 8 o'clock howl, we called it, in support of healthcare workers, which was a little stranger, and I really enjoyed it. And I met a bunch of my neighbors for the first time, I'm ashamed to say, because of that, because we were standing on at the end of the driveway, howling in support, and said hello finally to our neighbors, because we've allowed busyness to become our normal state.
Yeah.
And so, hopefully some small degree of good comes out of all this.
Yeah. And it's like you say, people are busy with their lives, their work, and, and you're excessively busy. You're on the front line, you're writing, you're producing TV shows, you're casting them, and you are super busy. But also, hopefully COVID is well, it's taught me that family mean everything. My friends mean everything to me, and you've got to do my work-life balance is a lot better than what it used to be.
It's strange times, and it has its lessons for all of us, and I enjoy being on TV. And while I don't actually produce, I just really give my opinions and consult and do those kind of things. But what's truly important at the end of the day is one another, right? Yeah. I do like to sit and write. I do like to do this kind of stuff. But what really matters is taking care of people. And in my medical career, I'm fortunate enough that I get to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm in a lot of nursing homes. Working as a paramedic, we run a lot of 911 calls in nursing homes. And those are some of the highest risk communities for COVID. The pay for people that work in them is never enough.
No.
And yet these people are still going in night after night, day after day, and they are putting themselves on the line for the elderly. So there are a lot of heroes out there right now, and a lot of them are not the obvious ones. They are not who you might first think of.
Yeah. So whereabouts, obviously just going off topic again, your books, obviously people can see your shows on the Travel Channel. They're obviously over here in the UK, they're obviously named differently to what they've been named in the US. But your books, where can people buy your books from?
You can get the traditionally published books at your local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones in the UK. You can get the majority of them, though, on Amazon. Some of them are self-published, and Amazon would be the only place you could get those. So drop by and see me online at my website, richardestep.net. Shoot me an email, send me a Facebook message to my writer page, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, I'm real glad to see this online convention going on. I think you guys have done a great job with an incredible lineup. And I want to thank you for inviting me and for putting this together.
No, thank you so much. And do you know what? I think that the whole COVID situation kind of made us realize that we needed to give something back. And, you know, for the love of everything, it's free, and that's the beauty of it. You know, we've got such a huge celebrity lineup, with yourself included, but also these Gettysburg tours. We've got Malvern Manor, we've got Johnny Hauser who's on there as well. So all these people who you've mentioned, and you know, it's great just to have them all under this banner for this one weekend. And I am very proud to be part of it. And, you know, for a few hours, you know, a few days, I'd probably say a few days out of the past 4 months trying to put this together has been a labor of love, to be honest. But I'm hoping that it continues as well.
Well, thank you for doing it, because I know a lot of us that are missing our ghost fix will really appreciate that this is out there.
I'm hoping so. But that's it from me. I don't have any further questions. I'm going to love reading these books. I do have another one in the pipeline that's being delivered tomorrow. So yeah, I just need to crack on and get on with these. But you haven't ruined Gacy's Ghost for me, so I'm going to look forward to reading that one as well. But I do hope that I do see you in the UK very soon. And you know, good luck with everything. Stay safe on that front line, and you know, love to the family, and just, you know, keep doing what you're doing, because you've brought a little bit of sparkle back to my life reading these books.
Thank you so much. That really warms my heart to hear it. And hope you have a wonderful Halloween, whatever you do.
We have the children, so we are I am planning at the moment, because we can't trick or treat here, so we are planning something just to put in the garden for my daughter and my stepson. So that should be exciting, to say the least. But whatever you get up to as well on Halloween, have a great one.